Welcome to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Hope Wilson. This podcast is designed to encourage and equip you to be a trailblazer right where you are, to help you discover your God-given purpose and bring you talks each week that will inspire you to do what you were made for. Each week, we will walk through different topics to help you grow in your life, career, and leadership. My hope is that you'll become poised for purpose and walk in that daily. I hope each week you'll feel more equipped to be a trailblazer right where you are. So let's get into this week's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am excited because this week we are doing the final episode for the intentional series. And this week we are talking all about intentional finances. And first, I want to start this episode by saying that I am not a financial advisor. All the advice that I give in today's episode are things that I have found helpful for myself, and I am just sharing in hopes that maybe it can help you as well. So just know that I am not a financial advisor. I am not offering official financial advice, but just if this works for you, great. And if it doesn't, then I hope that you can find some things that work for you as well. But finances is an area that I have struggled with a lot in the past. Math, honestly, was never my strong suit, and I didn't fully really understand how to budget for a pretty long time. In my 20s, I struggled a little bit with credit card debt off and on because I wasn't really good at sticking with a budget or understanding how to space out purchases or save for the things I needed. I felt like I needed to spend money to be able to hang out with people and make friends. And I wanted to have all the trendy things for my apartment because it felt like culture, constantly was like pushing that on us. And I also loved to eat good food. So I felt like I ate out a lot and didn't cook at home as much. And on top of that, I was also paying off student loans and figuring out how to adult and pay all my bills and all the things that happen whenever you graduate college. And growing up, I really didn't have to worry or wait to buy things. That was just my experience growing up. And so I never really understood how credit cards and all that kind of stuff worked because I didn't have that struggle growing up. I didn't have to wait to buy things, and money wasn't really a struggle. So when I graduated college, a budget wasn't something that I ever really learned much about until I graduated. And my mom always tried to teach me the right principles. She always tried to tell me, how to do it. But unfortunately, I'm the type of learner that has to figure things out on my own sometimes. So I never really paid too close attention to all the budget stuff. And this was really the first time I ever had to manage money fully. And I tried learning different principles and using all the different budget apps, and also kind of felt shamed by some of Dave Ramsey's programs. And I know those work for some people, but for me, it just felt like I had shame being dumped over me constantly. And I also felt lost trying to continually get to financial freedom. And I struggled a lot with shame, like I mentioned, especially around money, because I just wasn't good at sticking with my budget. And I felt like credit card debt was the worst offense I could have if I were to ever get in a relationship. And I agree that credit card debt is not good, but having a shame mentality is not from God. And I had to work on my money mindset and re-understanding how to view finances in a godly way. And I saw my friends saving so much money by living with their parents, and that just wasn't really something that was going to work for me because I wanted to live in a big city, and it was a city where I didn't have family. And so I constantly felt behind during my 20s with my finances. I struggled with a lot with comparison and seeing what everyone else was doing or what they could afford, and I didn't want to seem like I couldn't afford things. And so I just struggled a lot with that. And it wasn't really until I started understanding how to be intentional with my finances that things started turning around for me. And I finally ended up finding a budget system that worked well for me. And I put some other systems in place to help me be more intentional in this area of my life. And so I just worked on removing that shame and the lies that I believed about my financial life. And I started making more confident money decisions. I really prayed a lot about my finances. I really prayed a lot about my mindset around finances. finances. And I started getting more comfortable telling people no when I knew I couldn't afford to go out to eat or needed to focus on saving. And I also want to say that I know everyone's financial background and everyone's financial situation is different, but I think we can all agree that we can all be more intentional with our spending and our saving. And so that's what I really want to focus on in today's episode, is just some practical tips that help me. And I also want to say that I am far from perfect when it comes to finances, because things take time, and I'm in a much better place than I was years and years ago. And these tips have helped me so much, but I know that it's a constant work in progress. It's a constant work to continue to save and be intentional with spending and getting to a place of financial freedom. So for me, I'm still working on getting to a place of full financial freedom, but I'm happy to say that I no longer struggle with credit card debt, and any of the debt I have is something like a car or, a student loan that I'm finishing paying off. So I'm happy to say that that is something that is no longer a struggle for me, but I am still working towards getting to a better place of having more savings and having financial freedom. So I hope that today's episode can be encouraging to you. I hope that the tips that have helped me can be helpful to you, because one of the reasons I think that we should be intentional with our finances is because it can be so easy just to spend and not really think about what we're spending or why we're spending it or when we're spending it. And it can also feel overwhelming at times to just not have a budget and not to really think about what we're spending or why we're spending it. So I think intentionality is something that works really well with finances, because I think it's important for us to be able to intentionally spend our money, but also intentionally save our money. And when we're intentional about those different areas, we have more control over our finances, which also gives us more freedom in our finances. So one of the biggest tips that help me with being intentional in my finances is having a weekly budget meeting with myself. This helps me to be more consistent at tracking my spending and looking at my budget buckets. And if you are in a relationship or married where that's something you guys talk about together, then I would highly encourage that you sit down with your significant other and talk about that each week. And honestly, for me, I just use a spreadsheet. I don't use anything fancy for my budget. I don't use any of the apps. I have tried the different apps and they just didn't work the best for me. But if they work well for you, go for it. But for me, I just have a handy dandy Google spreadsheet for my budget. And I got this template from a friend years ago. And I've tweaked it for my own purposes so that it works well for me. But I just like to track things in Google Sheets. And recently I began doing, and even more with that, I started doing more of a daily spend tracking. And I use something called Notion. It's not a financial platform. It's more of just like this online notebook and organizational system that you can create. And one of the templates that I downloaded was for finances. So there's hundreds of templates out there for Notion if that's something you're interested in. Just if you want to organize your life and have everything as one central hub to look at. But I try to do my best to track my daily and weekly spending in my Notion budget page. And I'll be honest, I have not been able to do that in the past week or two because life just kind of happened very quickly. But normally this is what I do. So I hope that this can be helpful for you, because I found for me, I know the past few weeks when I haven't been tracking it as much, I found that it can be so easy to just swipe your card or lose track of where you are and your budgets and goals if you're not intentionally looking at it. And whenever I do follow it and I stick to it and I don't slack off with it, I found that it really does help me to make sure I'm sticking to my budget, to make sure I'm not overspending, to make sure that I really know where all my money is going. And I found that doing this is kind of the old school way of keeping a ledger or reconciling your transactions. I know most of our parents probably used to use the paper booklets, and I know my mom still uses that sometimes. And she taught me how to use it. So I basically created a digital version of that so that I can track my spending, because it's one thing, I know that all of our bank accounts track everything we spend in a sense by having that record going. But that's not something where it's connected to anything for me. For me, it's not connected in my brain to what it's taking away from or what it's going towards or things like that. So making myself physically write it down in my Notion app really helps me so that I know exactly what I'm spending, why I'm spending it, where I'm spending it, all of the above. And it helps me to add up my categories faster. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I know that there are apps like Mint or You Need a Budget or something else. If that works for you, go for it. I know a lot of those apps will automatically do that for you. But again, for me, I found that a more manual process was more helpful for me so that I was being more intentional in my spending, because that's just how my brain works. But if an automated app works well for you and you go in and adjust your categories and it can help you keep track of where your spending is, then I say go for it. Okay, so another thing that has helped me to be more intentional in my finances is something that I learned from this Instagram account called The Financial Diet. And they suggested to keep a list of all the things that you have an urge to impulse buy. And they say that you should wait a few months to see if it's something you still really want to buy, or you should budget for, or maybe you didn't want it as badly as you thought you did. And this has been helpful for me since I started implementing this, because I know it can be so easy to see something on TikTok or see something on Instagram where it's like Amazon must-haves or the things you didn't know you needed. And it could be so easy for me with having all the apps on my phone and all that kind of stuff to quickly just go in and buy it and be like, oh, well, it's only $20 or it's only $5. I'll just buy it now. But I realized that adds up really quickly. And before you know it, you can spend so much money that you didn't intend to spend. So it's been really helpful for me to keep record of that and to track things like that so that I can make a list of things that I have the urge to buy and wait to buy them when I actually have the money for it if I truly do need it. Or maybe the moment passes and I don't want it as much as I thought I did. So it gives space to really think about your purchases instead of just giving in to every impulse buy. And in that same vein, I actually deleted a lot of the shopping apps from my phone. Amazon is not on my phone. If I want to buy something on Amazon, I have to go to the web page and log in, which takes more effort. And usually I try to be more intentional with that even as well. I don't have a Prime account because I realized whenever I had a Prime account, it was so much easier to spend money so much faster because I was like, oh, well, it's no shipping. It'll be here in 2 days. Let me just click and buy. But whenever I unsigned up, unsubscribed from Prime and took the apps off my phone, I realized that I don't spend nearly as much as quickly as I do or without intention, because I really have to think about it if I want to buy something instead of just quickly buying something. And something else that has been helpful for me to make better financial decisions and has also helped with less impulse spending is asking myself, if I say yes to this purchase, will it push me further or farther from my future goals? And every purchase we make is either a yes to right now, a no to later, or a yes to later. And I know that I have big savings goals coming up. If I am trying to save a certain amount of money, that maybe I'll try to be more frugal with my spending currently, or maybe I'll do a low spend month. I call it low spend because I have tried the what people call no spend months before. And I've realized with being that restrictive, it causes me kind of like if you were to diet and really cut your calories, it can almost create, instead of it being helpful, later on, it can cause you to do a lot of impulse spending. So what I try to do is just have low spend months. So where I'm not spending as very much, I can spend on things if I really have to, but I really am thinking about it and trying to spend the least amount I can. So that has been helpful too. Or if I know I have a short-term need like clothes, like recently I just cleaned out my closet and sold a bunch of stuff and got rid of a bunch of stuff and realized that I do not have any summer clothes. So in order to buy those clothes, I kind of cut back on eating out as much or other things so that I could have room in my budget for new clothes, since I didn't originally budget a lot for that. But I try not to be overly restrictive with money, and I try to be more so just aware of what I'm spending, because it can be so easy to spend without thinking. Something else that has been helpful to me as well has been limiting the amount of marketing emails and accounts that I follow, because that really can tend to cause me to spend more. It can be so easy when I check my email to see the emails from like American Eagle or from Abercrombie or whoever, and it's like, oh, 50% off, or, whatever the sale is. And the thing to know with sales is they always come around, and they're never just a one-time sale. Marketers want you to think that things are one-time sales, but I promise you it will come up again, and while it's great to use a sale to get something at a discounted price, oftentimes sales can also cause us to buy more than we would have intended to in a season we didn't intend to spend. So just try to be intentional with that too, because it definitely is helpful with unsubscribing from those emails and limiting the types of accounts that you follow on Instagram or TikTok too. I realize when I follow more of the accounts that are like Amazon must-haves, or here's all these things, or like all the different influencers that constantly are pushing products, sometimes I just have to mute them for a season. But I realize when I'm not constantly being fed the things that I should buy or didn't know I needed to buy, or creating some kind of FOMO, then I spend more. But whenever I'm limiting those, I realize I spend a lot less. So I try to have more self-control with all of those types of things. And the thing I want to share is that because society is constantly pushing spending on us, and spending money isn't a bad thing, but overspending or spending money that we don't have can be a bad thing because it gets us into a bad situation. So I've just noticed that putting kind of some limitations or parameters or even boundaries around those things has helped me a ton. So maybe that can help you as well. And the last few things I'll share that have been helpful for me. So the overall goal for me with being more intentional with my finances isn't to be cheap or overly frugal or feel like I can never spend. I want to be intentional with what I spend, what I give, and what I save. And if I don't know where my money is going, it can be really hard to be intentional. And I've noticed that whenever I don't make time to budget or I'm not intentional, it feels really overwhelming very quickly to me. And this happens with my time as well. If I don't have a plan or I don't think through how I'm spending my time or what all I have on my plate in this season, I can get really overwhelmed. And it doesn't mean that I'm not flexible or I can't go with the flow. Being intentional just allows me to be more flexible in reality because it gives me better boundaries for the areas of my life so that I'm purposeful in those areas, which in turn allows me to be more flexible because I'm no longer anxious about where I'm spending my money or wondering if I can afford this or wondering if I have time to go hang out with this person because I already know what my schedule is. I already know what my finances are supposed to look like. So then I know what I can and can't spend on without being anxious. For those of you who know me, you know that anxiety is something that I struggle with. And living more intentionally has really helped me to not struggle so much with anxiety. It's helped my brain not to feel stressed so much. It allows me to help others more, and it helps me to have more freedom and flexibility. So I hope that all of this has been helpful. I hope that you've enjoyed this short series on intentionality. This is something that I'm obviously very passionate about. So we will definitely do more series on this topic in the future, as well as more content on the blog for this area. And if you follow me on Instagram, that's something that I post about a lot as well. So if you want to learn more about being intentional, or you want just to kind of go on your own journey of being intentional alongside me, follow me on Instagram and you'll definitely be able to go on that journey along with me. So I hope that you've been able to learn some different principles to help you become more intentional. And I hope that you found this beneficial. And also for our next series, I'm really excited. I'll give you a sneak peek because I'm really excited for what our next series is going to be because it's one that's very near and dear to my heart. Our next series is going to be all about church. And I sit down with several trusted guests and leaders to have real talk about the things that are going on in church culture, the things that are burdening our hearts. I talk about what the real intention of church is according to the Bible. We talk about how to overcome church hurt and so much more. So I hope that you'll join me for this next series because I really felt led to do it. And I believe it's going to be so impactful for leaders and those of us that are just part of the church. I think it's going to be impactful in general just for us as the body of Christ. So I'm excited for that, and I hope that you'll join me for that series as well. Also, don't forget, I announced this a few weeks ago. I just want to mention a reminder that we now have guest writer applications live on the blog, as well as our Trailblazer Highlight nominations. And basically what this is if you have a dream or a heart to write and you want a place where you can publish your writing, you can submit your articles to our guest writer application and we will be posting those on our blog. And then also if you want to tell your story or nominate somebody who has a story of being a trailblazer for God right where they are, we now have a nomination portal for that so that we can highlight different people on our blog each month. You can find out more about this at thetrailblazerjournals.com. As always, I would love for you to share the podcast with others, leave us a review, and subscribe to the show if you haven't already. It truly means so much. That's all for this week, so I'll see you back here next time. Bye, guys.